Welcome, Dr. Alain Beauclair, to Samsara Happy Hour. This is our third episode. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm really excited to both have you on the show and to drink Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So let's jump right in with one of these and then we'll go from there.
I think that's a good idea. Cheers. That's actually really good.
Very good.
Yeah, that's pretty delicious.
Very good. We've known each other for 20 years now, since, high school.
Yeah.
And you're now a doctor.
Yeah.
You're a university lecturer at MacEwan for philosophy.
That's right, yep.
And you went to school, U of A for your undergrad, and McGill in Montreal. I should say University of Alberta when I say U of A.
Yeah.
McGill. And then also U of T.
Yeah, Toronto, yeah, University of Toronto.
Great. And then you were in Eugene from there in Oregon?
Yeah, that's where I got my PhD, University of Oregon. The Ducks.
The Ducks. Great.
Fight Ducks, yeah.
And then you started teaching in Ellensburg?
Yep.
Washington.
Yeah. I was a professor in Ellensburg at Central Washington University for 3 years, and then my wife and I moved back to Edmonton and started working at MacEwan, where I continue to be right now, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So you're teaching at MacEwan University.
Yeah, philosophy,
Awesome.
yeah.
Only about 5-6 blocks from here.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
As we
Just
speak.
around the corner, yeah.
Do you have a favorite philosopher? Maybe we'll just try that. Do you have a favorite guy or gal?
I guess, Plato, it seems, I don't know, an obvious choice, I think, for most people. But yeah, I definitely enjoy going back to Plato a lot. I get a lot out of reading the dialogues. I actually never really get bored of them because they always seem to open up new ideas. So Plato is always a standby. I think some of the contemporary people that I really like a lot, actually a guy I've been reading a lot lately is this guy Stanley Cavell, who he's an American philosopher. He's still alive and kicking though. He's teetering. He's getting, I shouldn't say that, it might be rude, right? But
It's like Don Cherry. He's
he's
starting to lose his marbles.
I don't think he's losing his marbles, luckily. Don Cherry's lost his marbles.
I don't know if I
I
believe Don Cherry's, but anyway, different topic. That's a different philosophy.
Yeah. But he's just getting old, so you don't know how long he's going to be around. So, but he's somebody also, just recently I've been reading a lot of his stuff and find it fantastic, yeah.
Excellent.
So in philosophy, we often talk in ethics like really abstractly about questions of right and wrong, and is this a justified moral principle for anybody? And Cavell points out that should not be the end of philosophical inquiry. After we determine what we think is a justifiable moral principle, we also have to ask the question, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And he thinks that's a question for philosophy, and he says what we have to do is start taking morality personally. And as philosophers, we have to start thematizing that as a problem.
I almost feel like unless people are really committing to work on themselves and have a certain level of self-development and just have that as an ongoing commitment. I'm not saying it's a step A and B that you have to do that first before you can take on world challenges, but it just seems like that is a necessary ingredient. And when we talk about morality and kind of responsibility, I just think like it really depends on where someone's own consciousness is at versus, in their ego identification. And I don't think you can go and do what often comes to mind is become a monk or go into a cave or work on yourself. I don't think anyone has to do that.
Yeah.
My first meditation teacher asked that question: do you work on yourself first and then serve, or do you serve and hope that you'll kind of work on yourself along the way?
Yeah.
And he said, the latter.
Yeah.
And then that was from more of an engaged Buddhism and in Tibetan Buddhism world. But
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, I know that it could be used as an argument to not get too involved, like, oh, I'm doing all the self-work. But some of the, my favorite thinkers, Eckhart Tolle and Krishnamurti, at least those two, but I'm sure there's more, have pretty much said the state of the world relies on the consciousness of each individual, that we're not going to change the world unless each individual has some kind of awakening. But it is one of these symbiotic things that go back and forth a bit, where the world helps us to awaken. So it's not that it's just a separated process.
Yeah.
So there's that group consciousness too.
Yeah, it's so I mean, the real question is like, what should this project of self-fashioning look like, right? Like, how are we supposed to? And it can. There's this danger, right? The title even of Emerson's essay, right? Self-reliance is kind of.
That's great.
Hints at this danger, though, that it's all about me. For that, you have to kind of start turning inwards and start asking yourself, are these values, which I think I'm going to try and, assert and affirm in the world, are they worth affirming, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just simply serve, because that can actually be a very conservative act, right? If I just go out and serve without being critical of it, I could just be, sustaining the same kind of consumerist model that we have these days, right? Promoting capitalism. That
our governments are too stuck into business to help some of the ones that need help, and then yet people go and do it with their own egos, thinking I'm fixing the world, and it's propping up their own egos. I'm fixing, but. Yeah,
that's a really good example. Yeah,
I know The Rebel Cell is one of my favorite books. It's by a couple philosophers, Andrew Potter and Joseph Heath. And Joseph Heath's a philosophy prof from UT. Did you have a class with?
No, I never did, but I know him. Yeah.
But it seemed to me there's a lot in that book, The Rebel Cell. But it was saying that being rebellious and acting out against capitalism only really reaffirmed capitalism. That was kind of the what he was submitting, is that capitalism works on identity.
Yeah.
And we want to drive a certain car, we want to look like this and do that. Well, activists, just generally speaking, like their identity too.
Yeah.
And he brings up the example, critical mass, raising your bikes over their head and just, like we're taking the streets over. But really, that just kind of is still within the whole capitalist system.
Yeah.
And it's just reaffirming identities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if this is all our identity, it's reducible. There's actually, I can't remember who made this joke. I think it was like Colbert or something, right? Where he talks about if our identity is just reducible to, if I identify with the right, what does that actually mean in practice? And that's the important question, right? Like, what does it actually mean to say, well, here are the values I have, but in practice, how am I going to try to affirm them? And so if I identify with the right, and in practice how I affirm the values of being a conservative person is I buy an SUV, I have a support our troops bumper sticker, right? I listen to country music and so on. There are just all these consumerist choices, but we're just as susceptible on the left, like that guy's book, right? If on the left I say, well, I identify myself as somebody who's progressive, but how does that realize itself in practice? Well, I have a baby Bjorn, I ride a bicycle, or drive a Prius. No offense, right? Right? And so, right, all these sorts of things. But then you're right, we're still implicated in the same market forces, right? And so the same structures that inform our thoughts, construct our identities, and so on are still in place. And so we're not doing anything radical. We're not causing any kind of meaningful change, right? We're just still implicated and defined by these, these forces that are outside of ourselves, and so that's why I think the philosophical approach is it can't just simply be. I think many philosophers, rightly so, are critical of Descartes, but they're also critical of this. I think what's a false depiction of Dewey, right? You can't just head forward. I'm just going to go problem solve, but you can't just step back and just say I'm going to isolate myself from the world and sort these things out for myself. Right. So, but it's still, that's where we have to start asking these questions. What does the project look like?
Let's review the beer. It's going down, I can tell, for both of us.
That's right.
And there's so much to say about this beer, I think. Just a quick overview to get us into reviewing the beer. So it was first made in 1980. It was their first beer when they came out, Sierra Nevada. And so they're out at Chico, California.
Okay.
Yeah, hour and a half north of Sacramento. So it's Northern California. But sorry, it's next to, right at the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Okay.
And it's 3 hours north of San Francisco. So it's quite northern for California. And yeah, this was kind of one of the first original craft beers in the modern day age, because you could argue that 80, monasteries and in the past there's always kind of a craft to it all.
Oh, I guess, yeah.
That's never gone away. Yeah. But in the modern kind of persuasion of craft beers, this has been, they say revolutionary. That's really what a lot of American brewers have based themselves on. This brewer and this beer, this pale ale. And what's interesting, a hoppy beer. This is a hoppy beer. It's made with Magnum and Pearl hops to have that bitter taste at the beginning, but it's the Cascade hops that's the main taste of it, which is the finishing notes, and that's the grapefruit kind of citrusy notes. And another interesting thing is it's bottle conditioned. So you can sometimes see some yeast floating around in there.
Okay, yeah.
It means it has a second fermentation process.
Yeah. So
I'm up for drinking it all, but some people won't drink the bottom. They don't like that. But I ferment my own kombucha, and I like seeing the stories, and that's all good. That's healthy stuff. You're getting some probiotics in there. And I've read recently, I don't know if some of those probiotics survive in an alcohol environment, but there'll have to be some more tests done that way. But that bottle conditioning means it's also naturally carbonated during that second fermentation process. So I think that's what makes it it's very consistent. I've had this in BC and in Maui and in California. They're good everywhere, I'll say. And they're not available in Alberta. I brought this batch back from Portland, from Trader Joe's. Loaded up. Didn't know that after being there for 2 weeks, I was still only allowed a couple bottles of wine and or 4 6-packs. I got through with 2 bottles of wine and 9 6-packs.
That's on film now. They're coming for you.
I'm claiming ignorance. I just didn't know. I checked it after the fact, which worked well. Yeah. But and believe me, $6.99 or $7.99 a 6-pack in the States, as you know, living in Eugene and Ellensburg. Can't beat that. Yeah. And when I was watching some beer reviews earlier to prepare for this, there's a Louisiana beer review guy on YouTube saying the only negative I could find about this beer is I have to pay for it. I thought that was pretty good.
Well, maybe now that he had a nice review, they'll give him some free stuff.
Maybe.
Yeah, we used to drink.
That was his angle.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, we used to drink this stuff a lot in Oregon, because I actually do remember too, because Oregon's that big microbrewery place, right? Yeah. So they have all kinds of fantastic beer.
You're in beer heaven.
But one of the nice things, I mean, this is a cheesy thing to say, but I actually remember it was very cheap compared to these other kind of microbrews, and it goes with anything. That was the kind of thing I remember about, right? Because it's just pleasant. Yeah,
this one specifically.
Yeah. I mean, lots of stuff are really hoppy, or they're really rich or something. You can only have 1 or 2, and but if you just want to have a nice night and you hang out with friends, and you might be eating some chips or whatever, or having a barbecue, or you don't know what's going to happen, this really does go with anything. When we talk with each other normally, like when you and I are talking to each other at the beginning of this conversation, we're going to say, well, there's certain social expectations we have to live up to, right? And that's going to inhibit our ability to really start challenging each other, challenging ourselves. And you start having some alcohol, it lubricates that conversation. We're going to open up. We're going to start saying some, more insightful things. We're going to start revealing ourselves a little bit more. And by revealing ourselves a little bit more, we make ourselves a little bit more vulnerable. But sometimes that's an important thing as well, because only by making ourselves vulnerable can we start questioning those things that we like to keep hidden, right? Expose them, reveal them, start to get some insight into. And let's face it, alcohol is an important factor in that, right?
Yeah, it definitely is.
I think that's why people are fearful of alcohol, because it's a way of revealing the truth.
Well, a friend of ours, Levi, he once told me, maybe I shouldn't out Levi on this right now. But Levi, we're outing you. He was saying he doesn't necessarily have a trust for people that say they don't drink. Like, what's hiding? What are they hiding? Right?
Yeah.
But on the same token, I mean, I wrote a blog entry on our website, samsarahappyhour.com, that is called Alcohol Yoga Mindful Drinking Manifesto. And it does go into these pros and cons. And the pros do outweigh the cons, the way I feel. And part of it is, though, also setting a limit. Just because it's such a great thing in small doses, but for me it's a no more than 3. That's my limit is no more than 3.
You do have to know. I mean, it's actually interesting that the two the two dictums that informed philosophy at the time of Socrates was know thyself and nothing in excess. So, you know, never exceed your limits.
Which is a golden mean, is that right?
Yeah.
Or somewhat related?
Yeah, but the trick is discovering what that mean is, right? So here's, there's this great contemporary philosopher, John Sallis, who talks about this, and he actually exposes the tension between these two commands, right? So to know yourself is to know your limits, but to do nothing in excess, you must know your limits. Well, how do you come to know your limits? By exceeding them.
Yes, well, that's very true.
Yeah, so
that's very true.
But once you exceed your limits, it's too late. You've broken the second command.
Right.
In service to the
or
first.
How many times do you have to keep, you know, and that's where I was at. I was like, okay, I think I broke my limits enough now that I think I should know what that is, you know. I really enjoyed at your wedding, you know, the thing, even what we're talking about of kind of coloring outside the lines, your speech was one of the best line outside coloring that I've ever seen at a wedding, because you just said, hey, it was almost like you were sick of it. I don't know if you said that, but it's like, hey, people ask me, what are you doing with your life studying philosophy? And then you went and you said, this is what, you know, is so important is for us to think differently or be open. Just to thinking is a vague word, but really thinking.
It is. That's a problem.
That's a danger, right? Like we really, thinking is, we're stuck in a lot of lower thoughts all the time, ruminating. And it's more kind of an emotional lower mind thing. In Hinduism, it's called the kamamanas. It's, which literally means desire body.
Okay.
But that's where the bulk of all of our consciousnesses are, is that desire body. And it's that lower, monkey mind they call it, but it's really emotion linked with the lower mind.
Okay.
But philosophy and these higher concepts take us to that higher mind, just like higher mathematics or abstract mathematics apparently does, which is a philosophy in itself too. I took symbolic logic at McEwen with Sean O'Donnell. Is that his name?
Yeah,
I think that was his name.
Yeah.
And loved it. And Aristotle apparently wrote that textbook, and that's just mind blowing in of itself.
Yeah.
But what was my topic?
Well, it sounds like what you're talking about is, I mean, it started off at my wedding and right to this.
Oh yeah, your wedding, yeah, philosophy and why it's useful.
Yeah. Well, that was what I was trying to. That's what I think we need to challenge when people think of philosophy and how we try to market it today, especially in the university, which has become, you know, totally been appropriated by this economic kind of system, where we have to justify education in terms of giving jobs, right? Getting people jobs.
And just as a quick aside, you probably can't blame institutions tons for some of the directions they've had to take in, but it's become kind of a business depending on what government support there is, whatever country you're in, right? Anyway, but sorry.
No, you're totally right. Yeah, and I don't want to get myself into
No,
trouble.
I understand. Yeah.
But the problem I think many people have, especially when they come into a philosophy class for the first time, is the assumption that this is going to be useful. That is, it has this utilitarian function, right? And that always assumes that the end is already in view, right? Whenever anything is useful, we're taking something and employing it as a tool in order to realize this given end. And at its heart, I think maybe you could really boil down to philosophy as the attempt to question the ends we're already pursuing, right? And in that sense, it's not useful at all. And but in another sense, I think most people can appreciate when you start thinking about that. That's the most important endeavor for anybody, right? So I don't know much about the difference between this higher, lower mind stuff, but Dewey talks about a similar kind of idea. It sounded like he says in most of our ordinary experience, we're drifting, right?
Yeah.
And so we are just like completing tasks, fulfilling functions, realizing given ends, right?
Drifting is a good word.
Yeah, and so we're just kind of, you know, you're on your phone and I'm going to get this text and I'm going to get to this place, I'm going to get my dinner made, and, you know, and so we're fulfilling these tasks, but we're not reflecting on the character of these tasks, what's informing these tasks, the values that underlie them, and so on. And for that, you know, you need leisure, you need some free time.
Yep.
I mean, it's not a pursuit that somebody who's starving to death or somebody who's in a war-torn area is able to, you know, engage in.
Yeah.
But it's also so important because how else are you supposed to develop or fashion your identity, lay claim or take ownership over values or anything if you don't give yourself the opportunity to start questioning the things that occupy our day-to-day lives?
I agree completely. And when we talked about responsibility, I kind of see that as a responsibility. Like you're saying, it is a privilege in our situations, and it seems almost more fitting to say our situations personally than it is almost to say in our country, because there's people in every country that are like obviously marginalized or just are having a hard time. But to me, it seems like a responsibility. If you're in the position to engage in leisure, which allows for philosophy or spirituality or whatever inner work you'd like to, creativity, I see that as a responsibility to do it. And I think that pull towards it, no, people shouldn't feel guilty for that.
Yeah. But then there's still the tough question, how do we go about doing this, right? And what's worrisome is because usually these structures that inform how we think, what we value, and so on are very hidden. And of course, those who are being most harmed by these structures tend to be the people who are most hidden, right? So, and this is why I think philosophy is so subversive, right? It really is trying to reveal or shed light on things that are not ordinarily seen, which is simply, like in another simple way, is trying to shed light on our ordinary experience such that we can see it for what it actually is. This is how I won my wife's love. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so here we go. According to William James, he talks about what happens if I do not have faith that this person's belief, that this person will return my love. There is no rational justification, there's no evidence for it, right? With Catherine way back when, I had no evidence that she would actually respond in kind, right? So I had no reason to believe, no justification for believing that she would actually love me in return.
Even after dating and, you mean as far as asking her hand in marriage?
Even before that,
okay,
right?
sure.
Yeah. But what happened by having this faith is it led me to woo her, right? I had faith that this is a possibility. Because I had that faith, it led to a certain kind of activity, me wooing her, which is basically, as James said, I wore her down. And by wearing her down...
Wooing?
Yeah, wearing her down. By wearing her down, she came to love me in return, right? So the line James gives, when faith in the fact helps lead to the realization of that fact, that belief is rationally justified. So contrary to these people who claim that faith is always an irrational belief, he says there is a rational justification for faith beliefs, and that justification comes from the way in which it informs our lives, because we can bring about that kind of reality.
Yeah.
And so you get the Gandhi line, which is kind of tied to all this, be the change you want to see in the world, right? And I think that's very true when it comes to faith. But we still have to be careful, and we have to be critical what kind of beliefs we devote ourselves to. Is this belief actually going to affect this kind of behavior, this kind of change, or is it just going to lead to a quietism and acceptance? That's the danger, right?
No, that's very well said, and I like the word trust a lot. That no matter what does happen, if you can have a trust, at least in the end you'll get a little bit of peace, trusting. And I'm not saying even in a religious way, but just, well, this is what it is. You know, this is how it's going down at this moment anyway.
Yeah.
I'll have one final quote here to share, and Oscar Wilde. It seems like he's probably quoted the most, and who knows if he said all these lines, but it said one I stumbled upon recently. Life is too important to take seriously.
We need to be playful, yeah.
We do 3 cheers. That was 1, 2, 3, like a Buddhist gong.
All right.
Cheers.
Yeah.